Hey there, welcome to Blockhead, the Peanuts tribute podcast from a cartoonist's point of view. My name is Jeff Grogan, and I will be your host for the next few minutes to talk about Peanuts, Charles Schulz, and all things Charlie Brown, Linus, Lucy, and Snoopy too. So sit back and enjoy. Blockhead listeners, welcome to a new episode. Today we've got Tim Jones, the cartoonist behind the self-syndicated comic strip Sour Grapes, which can be found in weekly and monthly newspapers all around these United States. And if you are very lucky, Sour Grapes is appearing in a paper somewhere near you at this very moment. Tim is here today to talk about Sour Grapes, to tell us the story behind the comic and how it developed, the characters and how they get along with one another, and to fill us in on how he became self-syndicated, how he approached a bunch of newspapers in this digital era and found his way into print. But before we do that, I'm just going to take a few minutes and use my podcast as a personal therapy session, if you don't mind. Just for a few minutes. This is small potatoes, no big deal. The story takes a little while to tell, but it's just about some personal frustrations. But it is cartooning related. It's about the frustrations of a cartoonist. And so I'm just going to relay some cartooning frustrations that I had over the weekend and make of it what you will, because I'm sure I'm not alone in being frustrated at some time. So I wake up on Saturday morning to an email, and the email is from WordPress and from PayPal. Oh, from PayPal. You've been charged $324 for renewing your website, spikingthelens.com. And I'm like, what? I didn't get any advance notification. I didn't see that this was about to happen, and like, boom, and I'm like, $324? Man, I can't do that right now. I mean, I just can't. $324? I don't need this. Where did this come from? Is this real? So, I go to my website, I go to the account, I check it out. Yeah, I've been charged $324. And I'm like, oh man, I can't do this. So I contact WordPress, we go through the whole thing, and they refund my money. They're very nice and very responsive. And at the end of it, the discussion back and forth, the guy on the other end says, hey, well, since you're not going to do the business plan, everything that you've put up on the business plan will be lost, and you'll just go back to what you were. And I'm like thinking, okay, well, I don't remember spending this much money before. I don't think that I had a business plan. Well, anyway, so I say, okay. So what happens? Of course, I go to the website, spikingthelens.com, just to check. Everything's gone. Everything's gone. And it's reverted to one of those free sites. And it says, welcome to the world, your first blog post. And that's it. That's all that's there. And, well, I was mildly upset. Not terribly upset, but mildly upset. I was kind of shaken. I didn't think that I actually I don't remember spending this much money last year when I put the site up. I don't remember, it's like, okay. But it happened. There's nothing left. It's all gone. All the stuff, all the images, everything, every comic I put up, it's all gone. All into the nether regions of the internet. So I'm, okay. I sit back and I start to think, well, is that a bad thing? Is that a good thing? I could renew it now and then rebuild the site. But maybe that's not something I should do. Because, well, to be honest, I'd had zero traffic on Spiking the Lens for forever now. Even when I was plugging it here on Blockhead, I wasn't getting much traffic. And the comics that I was putting up on Instagram weren't getting much traffic. And, well, of course, nothing I ever put up on Instagram I'm not one of those guys who gets much more than 50 likes. If I get 50 likes, that's a big deal. And but I wasn't getting any pull to the website from it. So, I start thinking maybe it's a good thing that it's gone, and maybe I just let it lie, But then I start to think, oh man, this was 3 years of my work. 3 years of my life I spent developing this comic strip. I started in the summer of 2017. working on spiking the lens. And I did so after I had been, well, it's a story, and the story is, try to put it simply, I had been contacted by a comic strip syndicate, a comic syndicate, one of the big ones, not Universal, UClick, not Go Comics. It was the other one. And I got contacted by an editor there who had liked my work and was interested in what I did and was interested in some of the characters I was working with, was not particularly interested in Jetpack Jr., but was interested in my stuff and maybe just focusing on the family around Jetpack Jr. And I wasn't happy with Jetpack, and I hadn't been happy at Go Comics. I didn't get much. Well, I didn't get any kind of feedback, and you're just kind of put out there. And so I never got the feeling they cared much about what I was doing. It was just another thing that was up there. And I didn't get a feeling that the fans there liked the work. So, okay, this was great. Okay, somebody else it was, what it's like to have somebody who approaches you in the profession and likes what you're doing, and it's exciting, and a big syndicate, and I'm like, oh boy. So I start working on something, and the first thing I work on doesn't work out so well. So we talk, the editor calls me back, and we have a discussion, and she suggests that I start doing another thing. And I said, well, I have this other idea. I started working on this animation a couple of years ago. I don't think that idea would be right for you because it's more of a concept, and there's a story behind it. But maybe I could take two of the characters and develop it this way, and it could be a strip about an actress. And she says, sounds great. Why don't you send me some samples when you got some? So I start working on it, and I spent, 6 months, or not even that long really, before I had a bunch of stuff, and I sent it off to her. And anyway, a dialogue ensues that goes on for about a year and a half or so. At the end of that time, I'm getting really close with the strip, and she likes it, and I'm really encouraged. Something's going to happen with this at this syndicate, and I don't know what, but I'm not in a development contract. There's no deal or anything. But anyway, so I'm pretty encouraged though. And well, what happens is the editor retires, and she says to me, but don't worry, my replacement is going to pick up right where I left off, and she's great, and you don't have anything to worry about. It's just going to continue apace. Well, okay, long story short is the editor really didn't like my stuff. We never connected. There was something wrong there right from the beginning. She didn't really want to deal with me. I think it was just, this was the other person's person. I want to find my own people. And she was never interested in what I did. Although it wasn't an outright rejection, I never got that. It was just lack of what I would say is enthusiasm. But this went on for another year or so. And it really wasn't until this past December that she stopped answering emails. She never said, no, not interested, we're not going to do anything. In fact, the opposite. There were all these encouraging signs. But anyway, finally came to the end, she stopped answering my emails. So there I am, left hanging. And I'm like, okay, but that's all right. We live in the world now where it's cool, to go out on your own, and maybe this is, the right thing to do, because that's the way of the world, right? Is put up your website, build traffic, and, social media and whatnot. And you can do it on your own because that's what everybody's doing. So I go to do that, and, I'm working on the website, and I'm doing Instagram and all that kind of stuff. And nothing much is happening with the strip. And it's a difficult strip to write for a variety of reasons, but okay. But anyway, so I'm hemming and hawing. I've got other ideas, but I've still got ideas about the strip that could go on and develop, and it could become something else. Well, but what happens? What happens is, I don't renew the business plan, and everything is gone. And so I'm left there this weekend with no website. And the question arises, and it bothered me more than I thought it was going to bother me. I didn't think it was going to bother me that much, but it nagged at me. As the day went on, it nagged at me more. This was 3 years. 2017, I started working on this. It was 3 years of my life, 3 years of my work. I was deeply invested the way, if you're an artist, you get invested, right, in what you're doing. And you put everything into it. And this is 3 years of stuff. And all of a sudden it's gone. And yeah, I still have the files, and I could renew and spend the money. I could put it up on Webtoons or Tapas or something like that, reformat it all, and go through that whole process. But the question is, okay, is it worth it? Is it working? Is it? When do you cut your losses? When do you stop spending good money after bad? When do you come to the point where you acknowledge maybe there's problems here and something isn't working as well as it should? Is that the case? And I think one of the things that happens when you're deeply invested in something is that you can't see it. You're blind to it. And, your friends and family, they want to encourage you. They don't want to come right out and say, this is a piece of crap, man. You're working on something that's not clicking. It's up to you, the cartoonist. It's up to me to kind of come to that realization. Hey, maybe this is a good thing. Maybe I don't renew it. But nagging in the back of your head is that idea of perseverance and that old story, right? That old war horse about persevering. Because if you persevere, you'll succeed eventually. And okay, what do I do? Maybe I need to persevere. Maybe I do need to spend the money. Maybe all I need to do to make it more popular is just keep working on it. And that's kind of where I am. And that's kind of where I came, that's where my thoughts ended up on Saturday and Sunday and today, thinking about, okay, what do I do? And okay, I'll tell you what I'm inclined to do. I need to drink a little something here. I'm inclined to let it go. And the reason I'm inclined to let it go is I think there were problems. And I think there were problems in an old white guy writing a strip about 3 young women living in an apartment. I have a deeply held belief, though, that, you can get into characters and you can write them no matter who you are or what your background is, that if you invest yourself, you can do that. But that being said, there were other, and there are a whole host of stories in my head, a whole host of other stories. And I loved some of the characters and I loved playing with it and the idea of movie sets. And I love telling stories about movies. I don't know why it fascinates me. But anyway, maybe this is a sign. Maybe I should just put my energies elsewhere. And that's the question. At what point do you realize that maybe my energy is better spent on other things? And I'm at a point in my life where I have to consider that, where's my time best spent? What do I really want to do before, I can't hold a pen anymore? What do I want to do before I get to that point, What do I want to leave behind? And those are all the, that's all the stuff I'm thinking about. And I guess maybe the conclusion I've come to is that, okay, I'm not going to renew it. I'm not going to spend the $300. I don't know if I'm going to do Webtoons or Tapas with it. Maybe, maybe not. It's a lot of energy to reformat it, and I spent a lot of time adding color to the strip when I had originally done it in black and white. That took me months to do. I'm reminded of the story of Richard Williams in The Thief and the Cobbler, that great film that he spent a lifetime working on and eventually walked away from. And this isn't that. This isn't on that level. But it's mine, and it's my life, and it's my work. And I'm kind of, I'm left at this moment where I have to make a decision. And I think the decision, as I've talked it through here, is a pretty good one. I've got other projects in my mind, some that involve the same characters but in a different format. If you go to my website and you go to jeffgrogan.com, you go to my portfolio and you look at animation, you'll see a little clip there that says Bella Dilemma trailer. And that tells you a little bit of what I think I might do with these characters. I got Bella and I've got Suds, the agent for Bella. And I've got a story there that I love telling in animation form, and maybe I'll do my own episode in animation. Maybe. I'm working on a film right now that is obsessing me, and if you go to my Instagram, you get an idea what it's about. It's fan film. It's a fan film, but it's something I'm excited about and I love doing, even if it never goes anyplace. So that's cool. Maybe it's time just to walk away and move on to something else. I got another strip going, although the animation has taken up so much of my time. Yeah, I'm not freaking out. I'm frustrated because when you work that long on something, you have hopes for it and you get invested. And I think that's natural. But at a certain point, you have to step back and you have to look at it and you have to say, you have to make a determination. You have to make a realistic evaluation of what you've spent your time on. Acknowledge the good things that you got from it, the experience that you got, the challenge of working on it, but also acknowledge maybe the failures, acknowledge some of the difficulties, and make the best of it by moving on to something else. So I think that's where I'm at. And so spikingthelens.com is gone. Where it'll show up, if I put it up someplace, you can still read some of it on Instagram, but I don't know. Maybe I'll put it under a file on the jeffgrogan.com site. It's kind of hard to put comics up there, so I don't know if I will, but that's where I'm at. So thanks for listening. I feel better. I hope I haven't, bored your ears off there. And so let's get to the interview. And I'll tell you, as far as frustrations go, this is a pretty small one. As far as difficulties go, this is pretty small in the larger scheme of things. Talking to Tim Jones and the heart attack that he's just overcome, I'm telling you, man, that's where it's at. That's overcoming something. That's the big stuff. And this is just small frustrations, but I feel better telling you about it. And on to the next thing, okay? So, okay, without further ado then, Tim Jones and myself in conversation. Enjoy. Hey there, Tim. Welcome to Blockhead.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm doing fine. Thanks.
You're doing fine. You are in Rhode Island right now?
Yes.
Are you in the middle of a snowstorm like we are here in New York?
No, but it's blisteringly cold and windy.
Ah, okay. The winter
I haven't gotten any visible snow anyways.
Ah, okay. Well, are you expecting any? We're expecting like 5 inches today, I think. So.
I thought I heard them say like 1 to 3 inches, but it's New England, so anything can change.
Yeah, we the other day I was recording the intro for my an episode with Rick Stromoski, and I was complaining that I had bought snow tires and there was no snow. And of course, what happens now, is that it snows. So I'm not that I think I'm responsible, but,
Yeah.
But the entire county can blame me for complaining about not having snow for my snow tires. Now I'm going to have to go out and drive around in it just to get them broken in. But anyway, here we are, snowstorm, and at least here in New York, it's a good day to be inside and talking comics with a fellow cartoonist. So, Tim, you are the cartoonist behind Sour Grapes.
That's right.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about Sour Grapes, the comic. It's about a flying dog named Aesop, right?
Yeah, Aesop is a miserable flying dog, and Sour Grapes is about him and his odd friends all living in a problematic world. So we can all relate to problems in our lives, bad days, frustrations, and foibles. It's been around since 2013. It's expanded since then, and it's doing really well on its own.
So it started in 2013. Did it start as a web comic?
Initially, I introduced it on Facebook, and I also introduced it into my local town newspaper, so it had the best of both worlds.
When you started in 2013, it launched at the same time online and in a local newspaper. And the newspaper was a weekly? Was it a daily? Was it
It's a monthly. And,
it's a monthly, okay.
And it has a sister paper as well in the area. And that newspaper is distributed all over Rhode Island, which is kind of cool. But yeah, I wanted it to have two places to live. I wanted it in print and I wanted it online.
And what was the reason for print? I mean, in this world, where especially by the time 2013 rolled around, a lot of cartoonists are thinking solely about the web. And so, what was your impetus for seeking out print publication?
Well, that was just it. I knew online was important because it's got an incredible audience. But in print, I grew up with that, and reading the comics every weekend, and in the Sunday papers and such, and even on the weekdays. And so I wanted to keep that, and preserve that media in a way that it's tangible to me, and I think that's important. In addition to me growing up with that type of thing, I really wanted to keep that going and preserve, like I said, I guess I'll call it the old school way that we used to read the comic strips.
So you wanted the best of both worlds, and in part that comes from this is what you grew up with, like myself, like a lot of old school guys. It's not real until it's in print, right? I mean, it's great that it's online, but until you actually have it in newsprint, somehow it's not of the tradition that we grew up with Charles Schultz and Walt Kelly and Buzz Sawyer and all of those great comic strips we grew up with.
Yeah, and a lot of times what I do is I'll see somebody, and even people I don't know, I ask them where they live. And, if they're in an area where the strip is, I'll tell them about it, and then they'll say, oh my God, I read that every week and stuff. And that's so cool that it's in there. And, and that tells me that, people are so used to nowadays seeing this cartoons online. And so it's almost something special when they see it in a newspaper, I think anyways. Like I said, it's a tangible thing, so it's almost like they be like, I have my own copy per se, and who knows, maybe they'll cut it out and put it on their cubicle at work or something.
Yeah, I mean, it's true. That's something that people still do, and I know when I've done conventions in the past, or the rare times that I have, people, when you say, I do a comic strip, people always say, oh, are you in the newspapers? And so they still there's almost like still a knee-jerk reaction and assumption that comic strips go to the newspapers.
Right, and I think maybe they might see it as successful in that, not that it's rare, but I'll be at shows and that, and they'll see it and they'll see my books and that, and oh, this is cool. And then I have a list of the newspapers that I'm in on the table, and I'll tell them to, it's in multiple newspapers, and then all of a sudden they get the wide eyes and the raised eyebrows. Oh, that's so cool, and so it has its weight in that respect.
Yeah, a certain kind of validity comes with that. Even still, even today, when you say you're in the newspaper or of one kind or another, whether it's a weekly, an alternative, or something like that, it still means something, particularly to a certain generation, our generation, more or less, I think. I know 20-somethings and millennials and kids, even a little bit older than that, it may not mean as much. They don't have that. I don't want to call it nostalgic connection, but that intrinsic connection. We grew up with it. It was part of our lives for so long, but it's not necessarily a part of the life of younger folks. But still, to us, it still means something. And I share that idea that seeing it in print really is special and carries with it. You're part of that tradition, and it feels like it. And also, yeah, you're right. Somebody could cut it out and put it on their fridge, whereas you can't do that with an Instagram post. So it's got some benefits to it.
So I know when I was a kid, we also did the this is showing my age now. We did the thing with the silly putty.
Oh yeah,
and put it on it, and you could bring it up. I wonder if anybody's tried that with my.
Yeah.
Because it only works on a newspaper. You can't do that on your computer screen.
No, you can't do that. But you can take, the image and distort it however you want to in an editing program. But still, yeah, that was fun. Taking Silly Putty, and we used to do that all the time on Sundays. Take the comics and play with Silly Putty and pick up an image in the Silly Putty and then stretch it. It was great. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Boy, in those days, it was primitive technology, primitive Photoshop.
Yeah, it didn't take much, did it?
No, no, that's right. We kept ourselves amused with sticks and stones and whatever was around. Yes, indeed.
Well, my brother came downstairs with a black eye. It was just a Silly Putty.
Yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. Oh man, we sound like a couple of old guys now. That's for sure. So, tell me about, well, okay, a couple things come to mind. We're talking about newspapers, and the wonderful thing about Sour Grapes is that it's self-syndicated, and it's in 30 newspapers across Rhode Island and elsewhere.
Yeah, just under that. It's in 28 right now.
28 newspapers, and there are varying frequencies. Some of them are published weekly, some of them are monthly, some of them bi-weekly, right? Is that the case?
Yes, yeah.
So as long as we're talking about it, we might as well just, before we even talk about the comic strip, just talk about the business side. About you then have to supply it's self-syndicated, so you have to supply the newspapers with the material yourself. You're not sending it to a syndicate, and the syndicate sends out the material to the newspapers. You have to be in touch with those papers on a regular basis yourself.
Right. I do the strip traditionally as far as drawing it, in that I do bring it into Photoshop where I do the lettering and coloring and fixing mistakes and that. But in that, I transform it into a JPEG, and that's what all the newspapers get via email.
Right, and then you have to send them a bill and an invoice or something of that nature so that you can get paid.
Yep, I do the business end of it too, so that'll be a whole different email in and of itself.
Right. Okay. So do you get paid if it's a monthly, do you get paid on a biannual schedule, or is it every month, or how do you work that out? And it could get very complicated with 30 papers.
I had to kind of figure that out with everybody, but normally it's either a monthly invoice or a yearly.
Okay. And then with the monthlies, do you send them a whole year's worth at once, or do you send, and do they publish one comic strip a month, or do they do 3, or how does that work?
I have monthly deadlines, so I do one at a time. And the same with the weeklies, it's once a week.
I mean, like I said, that could get complicated. The business part of it, I think, self-syndicating is pretty difficult to do. How did you get started with that, and how did you approach the newspapers and find the newspapers to approach and all of that? Because it seems to me anyway, and I'm sure to a lot of folks, it's kind of a mystery.
Well, like I said before, I started with the my local newspaper. I gave them a call and I said, hey, I'm a Smithfield resident, and it's a Smithfield paper, and I said, I have a comic strip. And being a local artist, I'd love to be in my town paper. And basically, I love it if you be interested in supporting a local guy, and seeing what you think about it. And by the way, this was a phone call. When I contact newspapers, it's always a phone call. I don't send an initial email. So because I think it's important to have a conversation, because that conversation can grow into other questions or information, and that or emails can get annoying back and forth. So there's a lot of information that can come out in a conversation in one fell swoop. So I started there, and then they have, like I said, they have a sister paper, so it automatically went in there, and that was great because that's all over Rhode Island. So that gave me a staple to start out with, and it was in there for a little while. And then what I did was I started contacting some other papers in Rhode Island and said, hey, listen, this strip is popular in my town. I've been in this paper for X amount of time, and like to know if be interested in trying it in your newspaper. Send them some samples, and I would always follow up. I wouldn't wait for them to get back to me. Wait a week or two, and I got lucky with that. They saw it and they liked it and had a home for it, and they thought it was a good addition to the paper, and a guy from Rhode Island. And before you know it, I got a little bit of a train going as I started getting into more newspapers. So, for instance, now you're in a couple, three newspapers, and you contact another one and say, hey, listen, I'm in these newspapers, and it shows some success. Would you like it in your paper? And so now they know you're not a table napkin drawer. You're professional, and it looks great and stuff. And you've shown that you can meet deadlines and that, because I'm sure some papers have had people that really can't keep up, or they are, maybe they're not as responsible or dedicated, and they'll miss deadlines and that, which is tough for a paper because they've allocated a space for you, and if you miss that deadline, then now they have to rearrange the page, and I'm sure that's aggravating for them. And so that's what enabled me to keep getting into newspapers, because I was able to show, my discipline, and then, the quality of the work, and the success of the strip. So, it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, self-syndication is a hard row to hoe, basically, and not too many people are doing it. I think I'm aware of maybe a couple of others. I think Dwayne Abel, who was a guest on the show over the summer, has done a little bit of that. But even still, it's pretty tricky, and you have to have the wherewithal to make the phone call and get on the phone with an editor. Now, do you have editors that you're in contact with, specific editors at these papers? Have you? And when you call, do you ask for a specific editor?
Yeah. So a lot of this is cold calling. So I'll talk to editors, and I look on the websites, or I'll see a newspaper in town and I'll grab it and see who the editor is, and I'll call the paper, and sometimes they have their direct line, or I'll just call the newspaper itself and ask for the person, and they don't answer their phones. But I never, hardly ever anyways, leave a message, because I know how busy editors are, so I'll just keep trying them. And eventually I get a hold of them, and I do. They, we'll just talk. Some of them are very short with me and not very nice, and some of them are happy to talk to you and happy to see your samples. So
it's a matter of developing a thick skin a little bit too, I guess, not taking it personally, just knowing the editor has a lot to do, and that's just the nature of the job. And some of those folks are really just so overwhelmed they don't have time to talk to you. And then others, maybe who have a more leisurely schedule, are happy, to have something that's going to help fill the paper when they need it. Have you ever had any editorial criticism, or has anybody ever come along and said, hey, maybe if you did this, or this is something our readers aren't going to get into? Or have you ever had any kind of reaction or response like that from an editor?
No, as a matter of fact, I've never even thought of that. And no, it's funny you say that, because, and I speak at schools sometimes. It's important that the strip stands on its own. So when I send the strip out, or when I talk to these editors, 9 times out of 10, I don't even tell them what the title of the strip is. It's
Wow.
really strange. I say I have a comic strip, and sometimes I'll say, sour grapes and that, but and I go right into I have a comic strip right into it's published in 28 newspapers, right into it, and that either lights them up or it doesn't. So the editor that says, send me some samples, I do, and I don't ever put a description of the strip. I said, here, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. Here's some samples. Let me know if you're interested, period. So to answer your question, I've never had an editor say to me, you know, we can you do something that's more current in in an episode, or can you do something like this? And I'll always, or if it's political and that, and I'll never I don't go into those areas anyways, but I've never had that. It's either we don't have the room, or we only do something that's strictly local, no, locally related to the local news, or we just don't do comics.
Yeah.
It's usually of those three things. And the editors that I do have never said to me, we're doing an issue on this. Can you do something like this,
Uh-huh.
or whatever? I've never gotten that either. It's always just been, we've got sour grapes in our newspaper.
Yeah. They don't, so, holidays come along and they don't ask you to do something holiday themed or anything like that.
No, I usually throw that in of my own volition. You know,
Oh,
usually Halloween and usually Christmas.
right,
It's a
right.
lot of jokes with both of those.
Sour Grapes is about specific characters. There's Aesop, and then there's other characters who are in the strip and recur over and over again. But because it's printed once a month or once a week or something, the audience isn't necessarily going to catch on. So the strip has to sort of stand alone, like any single panel gag strip would, or something like that, without recurring characters.
Right. It usually finds a home on its
Hmm.
own in the papers, in that it builds an audience on its own sometimes.
The jokes are independent of the characters in a way. They deal primarily with situations that occur. Like, for example, the most current strip is about a painting, a flower painting, right? So,
Yeah.
and the two characters, there's a little gag there because ominous is a cloud. And he reigns on top of the flower painting, and that you don't need any explanation. That's pretty clear what it is, even though, ominous is a recurring character. Great name, by the way. I love
Oh,
that name
thanks.
yeah, that's great. I really do. The ominous, the cloud, fantastic. It's very clever. So he rains on the flower painting, and there's the gag, and that's an independent joke, right? It doesn't need any connection to anything else. We don't need to know why the dog has a cape and why it's sort of floating 2 feet off the ground. It's not about world building. It's about situations that are common to everyday life.
Yeah, I try and keep things simple, and I like to let the strip speak for itself in whatever's going on in that episode. And that particular one, it's actually one of my favorite ones, and I know I just drew it, but Aesop, some of my secondary characters, as I call them in the strip, appear every now and then, and Aesop has a pet cloud named Ominous, and it was strange because I have a dog and stuff, and I thought it might be interesting one day that Aesop had a pet, but I'm like, wait a minute, Aesop's a dog, but Aesop does absolutely nothing dog-like. And matter of fact, I refer to him as an individual, not a dog. But so I said, wouldn't it be cool if he had a pet and wasn't a dog? And then I started thinking way out of the box, and I said, how about a cloud? Rain cloud, a dark rain cloud, which is kind of a miserable thing in and of itself. So they kind of play off of each other.
Well, that's kind of a leap there from thinking about a dog I mean, I think of Mr. Peabody and Sherman, right? Mr. Peabody, the origin of
Yeah.
Mr. Peabody adopts a boy, and every dog should have a boy, blah, blah, boom, there's that great idea, but you went way off off base, and instead of thinking of other animals or human beings or whatnot, the pet turns out to be a cloud. That's kind of an imaginative leap there.
Well, I'm a space cadet to begin with, so one day I just kind of went, okay, I think I'm gonna go this route. It's funny because I really didn't have to think too hard about that one for some reason. I had old strips where um, a cloud would always. I didn't have a name back then. A cloud would always um, follow Aesop, and then he would just kind of not be communicating with that cloud at all. Not really a relationship. I just had these um, these episodes where you just run into a rain cloud and get rained on, kind of thing, and then it just kind of grew from there.
I think about the character in Little Abner. I can't remember his name now. I don't know if you're familiar with it. He used to walk around with a cloud over his head that was always raining. He was a character who was trying to get out from under a cloud, and he never could. That was a long time ago, though. So, but it's kind of, this is different, because Ominous is an actual thinking being. So,
Well, I was inspired a little bit by Eeyore,
uh-huh.
who was so depressed, and he had that dark cloud over him, and a lot of illustrations of him in that. So I was inspired by that, in that it was a kind of a part of the emotion that he was feeling.
Yeah.
So depressed and so down, that not only was it him, but just to make things worse, he's got this cloud over him and it's raining
Yeah.
on him.
Yeah. So, who are some of the other characters in Sour Grapes?
Okay, so the next one down the line is Maddie, Maddy. He's a not so bright astrophysicist, and
Not so bright.
he's not so bright. No, he's not the brightest bulb in the chandelier. And he uh, he used to be an inventor, but I kind of changed that, and I thought it might be more fun for him to be something that's supposed to be smart, but he's not. But he tries his best. He can't find a girlfriend kind of guy, and nothing really goes right for him. But the thing about Maddie is he never gives up, and no matter what happens to him, there's always a way that he's going to keep trying. So a lot of the gags that I have with Maddie is he has this online girlfriend, and she doesn't think she's his girlfriend, but they've never met. But he borderline stalks her, and just keeps trying to get her to go out with him and finally meet one day. And she's always turning him down, and very softly, insulting him and type of thing, and leave me alone. But the funny part is that she never there's never a hang up from her. She always answers, and she's always in a conversation with him. So it's kind of one of these love-hate relationships. And so Maddie keeps trying, and he doesn't give up. And even though she turns him down every time, he keeps trying. So I wanted him to have that. Even though he's not so bright in that, there was something good about him, some kind of a strength that he would have. I try and do that with all my characters. Just to back up to Aesop, he's a miserable guy, just kind of resigned to the fact that he's got to put up with these experiences in life and with his friends and that. But Aesop, on the other hand, is always a good listener, and in his own smart mouth way, sarcastic way, will give them an answer. Maybe it's not the one that they were looking for, but it might be a truth to it that's not what they want to hear, but it comes out that way. And so Aesop's always there for these guys, no matter what. Even though it's in a sarcastic way that he's just annoyed with the whole thing. He just wants to leave.
Did you say what the girl's name was that Maddie is?
The girl that Maddie's going for is Celeste.
Celeste. Okay, and that's kind of interesting. I like the idea. Does she ever appear in the comic strip, or is she always just a voice on the computer? She's
just a voice, either on text or on Messenger or wherever he's talking to her. She's just a voice. We haven't seen her.
I kind of like that idea, of sort of personifying digital communications in a voice, whether it's male or female. Just the idea that there's this individual personifying this technology and engaging with this other character It's kind of interesting. Unrequited love in the 21st century. It's kind of an update in a way of the little red-haired girl.
Yeah, and I named her Celeste on a kind of a play on words. Maddie being an astrophysicist, so Celeste is short for celestial. So
Yeah.
I tied those two things together, sort of, kind of.
Yeah. Nice idea. It's a great idea.
Oh,
So,
thank you.
and then you were good. So Constance is a different character then.
Yes, Constance is Maddie's little sister, and she's 16-year-old. Thinks the world revolves around her. Always angry, typical teenager. The slamming of the door, teenager when going into her room, or she's smart mouth, or she's rude, or just angry.
You
And
sound like you have
so
experience with that.
well, when I have two daughters. When they were younger, I kind of went through that,
Uh,
with the just on the couch and not wanting to do anything, and no, I don't want to do that, and dad, leave me alone, and then as they got older, it just got into your typical teenager kind of thing. So hiding under the blanket on the chair, just leave me alone.
yeah. Are
Thing.
they
So,
adults now?
they're both in college, so
Well,
they're
congratulations
probably
for.
hiding under their blankets in college.
But that's great. It's great. Have successfully raised two young daughters. That's fantastic. So, but you do have that well of experience to draw from.
Yeah, exactly. She's easy to write for, but kind of not. In the same way that it's hard to understand my daughters, especially when they were that age. So I just kind of try not to.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Just sort of from the outside rather than trying to get in. Yeah, trying to fathom those complicated issues at that stage of development is hard. Yeah, because there's a lot of stuff going on in a young person at that point. But so okay, so we have Constance, we have Maddie, we have Celeste, we have Aesop and Ominous. Who else is in there?
well, one of the secondary characters is Slice, and I wanted to have a character that was just the opposite of what Sour Grapes was all about. It has nothing to do with Sour Grapes. And Slice is a bear, so he is a slice of life. He is annoyingly positive. Everything's wonderful. He's always happy, annoyingly happy, and wants to give everybody a hug and just show how wonderful life is, like, all the time, no matter how bad something can get. And I know I've known people, and I'm sure people know people that are really happy, but it gets really annoying sometimes, especially when you're in a bad mood. So it's like, it's not that great. Just, let me have my bad day.
Yeah, yeah.
But he's determined. He's a determined guy. He's going to show you why things are wonderful, no matter what, no matter what's going on. So
We need people like that in the world.
yeah, exactly. That's what I wanted to have. I wanted to have that guy in there that's going to show everybody's problems in that's happening in that episode, how they're not problems, and how you can turn them around.
Sure,
And
glass half full kind of guy.
yeah. And the other thing that happens sometimes is I have snowmen characters in the strip that Aesop communicates with. And that's another one where I don't know where that came from, but those strips pop up every now and then, and even in the summer, I'll have snowman episodes just because it makes me feel cool, and and these episodes is there's no speaking in there, unless maybe for the last panel when Aesop has some sarcastic reaction to what's going on, but it's thought clouds, and so they're talking to each other, but it's a communication. There's no no animation in the mouths from either the snowman or snow women's for that matter. And those strips are really straight jokes that I decided to just use those strips as. And it's worked out so far really well. I really enjoy doing those episodes, and it's not a separate thing. They're in the world, and they're um, uh, part of the Sour Grapes world, and that. So maybe someday I'm gonna have them be involved with the other characters. But right now it's Aesop's the one that can communicate with them, and there are other people that he helps in his own way and is annoyed with, and just kind of will I have a lot of look at the camera, as I call it, look at the audience, and just kind of be like, I always subject myself to this stuff, and so on and so forth. So
there's a lot of breaking the fourth wall in Sour Grapes, where the character addresses the audience, right?
Yeah, I want to involve the reader as much as I can. And a lot of the cartoons I used to watch, especially Bugs Bunny, there was always an interaction with the audience. Because if you remember the Bugs Bunny cartoons, back in the 50s or the 60s, those came out, where people went to the theaters all the time, and that was what was playing before the main feature. And so you look at especially the old cartoons, where they'll look at the audience and they'll be talking to them and saying something and whatever. So I was influenced by that. I used to watch and still watch Bugs Bunny a lot, because there's a lot going on there. So
they're brilliant cartoons. Yeah, Warner Brothers is. I'm fortunate enough to teach a history of animation course, and we do spend a chunk of time with Warner Brothers when we do that class. And I really, and we spend a lot of time with them. I have to tell you, just out of personal taste, I just love those Warner Brothers, Looney Tunes and Merry Melodies cartoons, and Chuck Jones and Bob Clampett and Frizz Freeling, all of those guys. I love their stuff. And Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, they're hilarious. Just, I mean, I was just having this conversation with Rick Stromoski. We were just talking about a little bit about animation, because he's doing a little, and I'm doing a bunch of animation these days. And in terms of the animation that affected us, we were talking about how Disney really was never our favorite thing, but Warner Brothers was definitely a big influence, because the sense of humor was just, and Fleischer cartoons too, Popeye and all of those from the 30s. There's just this love of the medium and what the medium can do, and they seem to just revel in their nature as cartoons rather than imitating reality. And that's what I really responded to. They were unlike, like, say, Disney, who is always trying to push realism, get closer and closer to nature, drawing classes to draw, the deer for Bambi, and all to great effect, wonderful effect. Warner Brothers and Fleischer were all like, we're cartoons and we love it, and so they were always pushing the envelope and trying to do anything that cartoons could do. It's great stuff.
Yeah, I think it's important to involve the reader in that, because it makes them even closer to liking the strip. And I know I can't put my finger on any strips right that I can think of, but yeah, I've always been drawn to that in my own reading. When you involve the reader, I like to leave the imagination up to the reader. I don't. If you notice in my strips, I don't hardly use any backgrounds. And if someone's talking about their car or whatever, I don't draw a car. I don't need to. I just said that they were in their car, kind of thing. And so I want, if I say, I had one strip where Maddie said he was waiting for a tow truck for a long time, and I'll establish the fact that he's already talked to the company and stuff. So I didn't need to draw a tow truck, and I did need to do this, and it wound up he was late because he got a flat tire. So that was that was a joke, and so I think it's important, and I'm influenced by that with Peanuts, because I saw a lot of that. There wasn't a lot going on in the background, so I wanted to leave it up to the reader to fill in the blanks and to fill in the background, as it were, on their own. And again, having the reader be involved in the strip, I really like that.
What is the title of the Chip Kidd book about the art of Charles Schulz? Only What's Necessary, right? And I mean, that is certainly a lesson that comes from Peanuts. The idea that particularly, it's really interesting in Schulz's work. You can actually see the evolution of that idea. He starts off by drawing fairly elaborate backgrounds in the 50s, particularly in some of the Sunday strips. And as time goes on, and he even draws like Snoopy's house in 3/4 view. That's always like my benchmark for, acknowledging where Peanuts really turns a corner, is when Snoopy's doghouse goes from being a 3/4 view doghouse to a profile view doghouse. And once it's a profile view, after a couple of years, it never goes back. And so, he sort of whittles away at extraneous detail over time, in the end resulting in this vocabulary that's really very streamlined and very minimal in a sense, comparatively speaking, to a lot of the strips that were around it, in the belief that the humor is better served by the idea of less is more in terms of the illustration. And I think that that's a great lesson to take from Peanuts, is that idea.
Yeah, I like I said, I love that. There might be a Peanuts thing with a Peanut strip with Snoopy on the honest dog house, and then Woodstock comes flying by and does something crazy that kind of annoys Snoopy in that. And in the last panel, all of a sudden Snoopy's looking at you, the reader, and that's awesome, because now he's maybe saying, "Can you believe this?" kind of look on his face, and that, and then it's almost like you can agree or you can relate, kind of thing. And Aesop will say something looking at the reader maybe, but it's still you're involved. You're part of. That's a good way to put it. You're part of the strip now. You're in. You're not just watching a movie. You're involved. So I think that's a lot of fun. So I try and do that as often as I can.
I think one of the things that happens when Snoopy addresses the reader, or Bugs Bunny addresses the audience, or Aesop addresses the audience, is this idea we're all in on the joke, and we can all roll our eyes together at whatever Woodstock's doing, or whatever ominous is said or whatnot. We're all part of that scenario, and we all understand one another. So you become part of, you instantaneously create a relationship between the reader and the character, and that certainly opens up the strip and makes it more welcoming, right, to a reader. So that's a really good approach. I think it's certainly something that I always enjoy in comics in general, whether it's in Sour Grapes or it's in Peanuts. So let's talk a little bit about your influences. We're talking about Charles Schulz and Peanuts, and I'm sure there's more than Peanuts too, but let's talk about Peanuts a little bit. You've got a lot of great characters, and some of these characters, when you identify Slice as somebody being, optimistic, and then you talk about Aesop as being somebody who's kind of more or less miserable all the time, that kind of parallel, if you will, yin yin and yang, if you want to call it that way. It's kind of played out in Peanuts too, right? We have characters who are well defined in that way, who play off of one another in interesting ways. Whether it's Schroeder at the piano and Lucy going at it, or one of the two other characters, or Charlie Brown and Peppermint Patty, or whatnot. There's this balance between characters that's in Peanuts that's kind of interesting to see. That's in some way reflected in your own work.
Right. It's funny you say that. I've never thought of that with the parallels or the opposites. It's almost like opposites attract. I'm 1,000% nerd, and my wife isn't. But for some reason, we attract. So it works out for some reason. So, it's important to have, I think, those comparisons and also those relationships, because for strange reason they complement each other. I think.
Well, yeah, it's like, night and day, right? You've got to have, if you have too much of the one, it just, there's no humor there. I mean, humor in a lot of ways comes out of conflict. And I think that's one of the things that's, really evident when you analyze Charles Schulz's work and you go into Peanuts. You see that, conflict is the nature of humor there. And the conflict, whether it's between Charlie Brown and Lucy and the football, or whatnot, Snoopy and the Red Baron. There's humor in that, and that's part of everyday life. So, it makes sense. I think what's wonderful about what Schulz did, and I can kind of see it playing out in what you're doing, is this balancing of characters against one another and situations against one another, so that out of that you have this reliable basis upon which to build, humor, jokes, gags every day, and keep a wealth of material, resurfacing, because those are not conflicts that are easily resolved, So they are great fodder for a well that never runs dry, so to speak.
Right. It's the gift that keeps on giving.
Exactly.
Like you said, you have night and day, but they're both part of the day.
Yeah.
Well, it's just one's darker and one's lighter.
Yeah, exactly. So talk a little bit about some of your influences. So what were some of your favorite comic strips?
Oh, geez. I would gravitate, growing up, to Garfield, and to Hagar the Horrible, of course, Peanuts, and I always gravitated to the simple ones, as far as drawing goes. So when I'd see Garfield, I read Garfield a lot, and that was the first strip that I went to in the newspaper. I'm highly influenced by Schulz, but Garfield was another one for some reason, and I would. Every Sunday we'd get the Sunday paper, which was about 8 inches thick at the time. Sunday comics were wrapped around on the outside of the newspaper. Imagine that.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have to search for them. I took them right out and put them on the floor. I got a box of Dunkin' Donut Munchkins. Just went to town. I just would get that, start drawing Garfield like right away, right on the newspaper, right next to him, in any space I could find, or maybe even just a piece of paper. But at the time I didn't really pay attention to, just because I was a kid, and I really didn't pay attention. Well, I'm an adult, I don't pay attention to anything too, but I just read the comic, and Garfield and Peanuts just really struck me. Why? Because they were major characters to me. You knew Garfield right away. You knew Charlie Brown right away. You knew Snoopy right away. They were the ones that were, specific characters to me. And the same with Hagar. Hagar the Horrible was, and is still, simply drawn and fun to read. And a lot of the gags are, you may have seen before and such with Hagar, but it's okay, because that's what that world is about. So you may have, a running gag every now and then of them, storming the castle kind of thing with all their swords and shields and that, or Hagar's wife is giving him a hard time about whatever, and that. But and then Garfield, it was always him doing something with Odie, or annoying John, and or eating food, or whacking a spider, and that, those attributes. And then Peanuts was in another world in and of itself, with what was going on in there. And so I really was influenced by all of that, and some other ones that I can't think of, but those are the ones that stuck out to me. Is being a kid looking at those, there was a lot of my imagination running wild with these characters. With Charlie Brown, you had the movies, the Christmas specials, and that, on top of reading that strip. Well, at the time, that's my age, and so I was able to have that in the back of my mind as well as with Peanuts. So that even got me more into Peanuts, because I could actually hear the voices when I was reading the strip, and more of the personalities, because they were animated in the cartoons and in the movies that they were in. And eventually Garfield, you started seeing Garfield and other media, greeting cards and posters and stuff like that. And in a nutshell, the big ones for me are Peanuts and Garfield. Those are the ones that I've drawn the most. And in drawing those characters, it helped me to understand them even more, because now they've gone from being in my mind, in my imagination, into my pencil, and able to see them on my own, in my own interpretation. So that's kind of deep, huh?
Yeah. So I can see a lot of Garfield in Sour Grapes. That is, now that you mention that, I think about that. I think, well, yeah, the simplicity of the backgrounds, the design of the characters, even the way the characters kind of interact. There's clearly a kind of direct line from Garfield to what you're doing, and it's interesting because it wasn't like something that jumped off the page at me when I looked at the comic strip and read it. But now that you mention it, it's definitely like the underpinning of Sour Grapes is, yeah, very much Garfield. There's a big chunk of that in there, and that's pretty cool. Very interesting. Of course, Garfield, I think Jim Davis literally modeled Garfield on the idea of Snoopy. I mean, it was like, let's take Snoopy and turn it into a cat, and then play with the personality a little bit, and boom, you have Garfield. And of course, but in the 1980s, and I'm assuming that's the period you're talking about when you were growing up, Garfield was ubiquitous. It was everywhere. It was huge in the 80s.
Yeah. No, I remember Garfield from the 70s.
Okay.
When
So
he looked completely different.
Yeah,
And
very different.
And as time went along, he just transformed, like a lot of cartoon characters do. Over time, they'll change in that. But
yeah, there's that natural evolution.
Yeah, exactly.
You were reading primarily in the newspapers, it sounds like, not so much from collections.
Right. Yeah, at the time, it was something that I look forward to every week. I can't wait to get the newspaper and read the comics.
So you weren't reading the dailies so much. It was the Sundays.
Yeah, we didn't. The newspaper, we would pick up after church. There's one stop to get the paper and another stop to get the donuts. That's what I look forward to.
Yeah, I had the same kind of thing. My dad was a big, well, we would go to church pretty much through my high school years, and even though my mom had stopped going, but Dad would make sure that we went to church. Not that I was a happy churchgoer, I never was, but on the way, the great thing about that for me on the way home was we stopped at the pharmacy, and at the pharmacy, Dad picked up 3 newspapers. and there were comic books. So my pharmacy sold comic books in the newspapers, and I was always able to get a couple of comic books, whether it was money I saved from my allowance or doing chores around the house or something. And we had the newspaper. So Sunday was a big comics day for me, and so I kind of relate to that. It was I really loved that. I miss that now, because the newspapers aren't the same anymore. You pick up the Sunday and it's really disappointing. What used to be a multi-page section, it used to be a thick, nice, heavy section. I remember the New York Daily News had Dondi on one page and Dick Tracy on the other, and it was filled with comics. And now it's just like 2 pages, and it's so disappointing. But that's a wonderful memory, and so you read them and it's interesting. I think this is instructive, because reading the comics, whether it's on a weekly basis in the newspaper or daily in the newspaper, that's a distinct way of experiencing them, as opposed to, say, going to the library and picking up collections of Garfield and reading them there. I mean, that's a different kind of experience, reading them all at once versus reading them in installments.
Yeah, like I said, there was something about it. I was going to say that I also had a paper route. So it was, okay. I can't remember, it was either I did the Saturday or Sunday papers and that. So I was constantly surrounded by newspapers and the comic strips and that. And I always used to save them and cut them out. Like we talked before, I would cut out some that I really liked and put them up and, wherever. And, and the rest of the newspaper would just kind of, back then we had a fireplace, and we used to roll up the newspapers and use them as logs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So you had a newspaper route too. So you were, no wonder, for you, getting Sour Grapes in newspapers is very important. Because that's a deep connection there in your experience at comics, your experience growing up, and what you loved about the newspapers. All of it's tied together. So it makes a lot of sense that would be your emphasis for Sour Grapes now, is being in print in a newspaper. So when was it that you decided that you wanted to be a cartoonist?
I used to draw on the newspapers and stuff. I was always drawing, doodling, notebook doodling or whatever, just sitting at the table and doodling and that. And it was always, it was never a landscape. It was never just something generic and stuff. It was always a character, no matter what I was drawing, whether it was Snoopy or whether it was Garfield or whatever. And, I would start drawing scenes, and I would maybe draw myself or some friends in that playing kickball, but I would always give them their own identities, their own quirks and that. And my parents would always be like, hey, you're pretty good and that, and so I just kept going and in my childhood, and then finally into high school. We had a high school newspaper. I was a freshman. I just all of a sudden said, "Oh, can I do a comic strip for this?" And so I did, and that was fun, and it wound up in every newspaper, and it, teacher liked it, and not sure about the whole class, but but it worked out, and so I did that. And then ever since I did that, the name of that comic strip, by the way, was Beasley the Bee. I drew a bee because it was easier to draw. He just went through, different quirky episodes, and that didn't really have too much involved in it. So, and just time went on, and I was in art class all 4 years in high school, and I went to art school, and I always had the cartooning in the background. And you go to art school, and now you're drawing the serious stuff. You're painting the gourds. You're drawing the figures and feeling uncomfortable in that class, and so on and so forth. And then, but I always had the cartooning in the background, and finally, I just wanted to stay with that, just because of what I grew up with. I didn't see myself as a caricature artist. I didn't see myself as a painter. I didn't even draw. Every now and then I try and tackle a Spider-Man, a realistic, anatomically correct drawing in that. But cartooning was easier for me because it was out of the norm. You would draw a cartoon character, and it wasn't anatomically correct. It was thinking out of the box. That's what I wanted to do. Wanted to just do something different. I like doing things differently anyways. So that was the kindling wood, as it were, to get me springboarding into drawing comic strips and cartooning and that. So
Where did you go to art school?
I went into I should say art school. I was an art major.
Okay.
At a college and
In Rhode Island?
and it was in Massachusetts. I was there for a while, and I had a bad thing happen to my friend, and kind of left me in a bad way. So didn't do so well in my last semester there. So I ended up transferring out and took some time off, and then went into community college here in Rhode Island, and took the extended 2-year plan and extended it to 17 years on my own, paying for it and that, and living on my own, and finally graduating with a degree in art, and always having that cartooning going on. So that's that history.
Yeah, so well, that's something to be admired, though, Tim. The wherewithal and the tenacity, because adults going back to school, it's a hard thing. And I've known a lot of, as an instructor over the years, I've known a lot of folks who've come back to school, and I know how hard that can be, whether you're raising a family, and going to classes at night and paying for them yourself. All of that's difficult stuff, and it takes a lot of discipline and a lot of will and drive to do that. So I applaud that.
Thank you. My oldest daughter was born. I graduated in 2001, so my oldest daughter was born in 1999, and I was still going to school. I was working second shift, and I was going to school during the day, and at the time, my next daughter was born in 2001, I had 2 kids in diapers that I would take care of during the day too. So I was busy, and I still got it done somehow.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So you graduated with a degree in art, and so have you? I mean, obviously that helps with the comic strip, but comic strips don't necessarily pay all the bills. And so have you gone out and you're doing other kinds of work to help supplement your income?
Yeah, I work full time as well. I have another job, that's paying for the kids in college and everything else.
What's the job? I mean, it doesn't, but I'm just curious. What's the other job?
Oh, I work for a small machine shop.
Uh-huh.
And it's 2 minutes down the road from where I live, and it's wonderful. They support what I do, and I'm able to. I speak at a lot of schools and teach at schools and that, so I'm able to do that, and I do Comic Cons and that, and I'm able to do that on the weekends. Sometimes work on a Saturday. So, it works
flexibility. Out. Yeah. So
yeah.
It sounds like you've got a good relationship. How long you been there?
5 years at this one.
Okay. So, and it's something. So when you say you work in a machine shop, do you fabricate machines, or exactly what's the nature? I'm just curious because I think it's important. There's this idea. I think more and more cartoonists support their habit, and themselves with work outside of just selling comics. I mean, because I think it's become increasingly difficult in order to, for a lot of folks who are doing cartooning to make a living solely just through their comics. Print publication that pays, a living wage, if you will. Those kinds of things have all, I think, sort of shrunk in the number. There's still plenty of them, but it's still, I think it's less than it used to be, and so a lot of folks have to supplement their income with work elsewhere, and whatever that might be. So you work in the machine shop, and as I said, do you fabricate, or what
Well,
exactly do you?
the machines, they make parts for aerospace, medical, stuff like that, and I'm the inspector. I make sure things are made right.
Your
And
quality control in a way.
yeah, exactly. And it's good. It's got nothing to do with art, but at the same point, part of the job, I'm sitting down a lot, and I'm thinking about the next strip, and I'm writing it in my head or whatever. I drive my wife crazy because it's all I talk about.
Me too. Yeah, me too. She gets tired of hearing it.
Sorry, honey.
Yeah, I know. It's the same, and I know it's not interesting to people who aren't in that headspace. If you're not in the midst of creating this stuff, I mean, it's in some ways it feels like life and death to us because, the characters are alive in our heads, and then all of our self-esteem is connected with it because it's what we grew up wanting to do and idolizing stuff. But real life intrudes. But I think I've interviewed people who are very successful as cartoonists, and then people who, like yourself and myself, really have had to supplement their cartooning is not where they make the bulk of their living, because things didn't work out one way or the other. And I think part of success as a cartoonist is not only talent and the will and the drive and the stick-to-itiveness, but it's also timing, being in the right place at the right time with the right property. It's also meeting the right people at the right time. And it doesn't always pan out, and I think it's important for the audience to hear that, other cartoonists to hear that, because I know that's true for so many people who are very good cartoonists, but still, whether they have to supplement their income through doing illustration work, which is great if you can find that, or design work, or they supplement it with some other form of employment. And when you talk about working in a machine shop, well, I worked in a factory for 3 or 4 years when I was younger, and before I, and becoming my whole career to becoming a university professor, I've often said this, was not an easy one, and it wasn't a straight line. It was a lot of here and there, turns this way and that way along the way. It wasn't straight, and it wasn't easy. There were periods of times when we weren't making a lot of money. There was a period of time when, in the early days, when I worked in the factory for 3 or 4 years, and it was a great job for what it was, at the time. I mean, it helped me get through and pay for college and all of those kinds of things. And it was an interesting experience in and of itself. It wasn't easy work, though. It's a hard job. It's just a reality, I think, and I think it's a reality that I think would be of interest. There are people like yourself and myself and others who continue to work and endeavor in large part for the love of what they're doing, the belief in what they're doing, but, for whatever reason, find themselves also carving a different path, if you will, than the standard one. So I have to, I mean, it's difficult to do all of those things, and I applaud that. So, I think it's kind of cool that you have this job that gives you the flexibility and the understanding, and there are people who understand what you do, and also you've got this great experience to draw on and put into the comic strip as well.
Sure. Like I was saying, touching on before, I do some freelance work. I do visit schools and
Mhm.
libraries and
Sure.
give workshops, after school enrichment programs with cartooning and stuff. Because a lot of schools don't have anything. They have an art class, but they don't talk about or do anything with cartooning.
All right.
Um, not very much that I've seen. I've been in a couple of schools that have had me in because they're doing a character building thing, which I was like, wow, that's awesome. So yeah, of course I'll come in and talk and demonstrate in that, and the kids love it. They really do, and so
Sure.
I that's important. So I'm very happy to to do that. I'm constantly talking to people. I've learned a lot from people. As a matter of fact, quite a few of the people that you've interviewed, I've had the pleasure of meeting. And I've spent some time with Rick as well. We've done a couple of some shows at the together at the NCS booth, and so Rick is just a wealth of information. I just sit back and I just listen. He's wonderful. Rick, if you're listening, hi. And
Yeah, Rick, we
and
had a great conversation, Rick and I.
yeah, I
Lasted for
listened
a
to part
couple of
one. I
hours.
can't wait for part two.
Yeah, Rick is great, and he was great on the show, because he is a wealth of information. He's had a great career and an interesting career. Another guy, very much self-taught and pulled himself up by his bootstraps, if you will. And a lot of cartoonists do that, and have, I mean, because it is difficult to navigate the professional world, cartooning world, because there's a lot of books now, but when you or I were growing up, there wasn't a lot of direction. It was kind of a mystery as to how you navigate that world. And so I admire people who've been able to do that, but I also admire people who continue to devote themselves to this medium even when they are juggling a lot of different hats and have to work raise a family, but also have to support themselves in whatever way they have found available along the way, as cartoonists and as human beings. It's not an easy road, and so more and more too, some really great cartoonists like yourself and others support themselves differently in different ways. So you're also a member of the National Cartoonist Society, and that's something that you proudly display on your website. So how did that happen? How did that come about?
Well, it was Rhode Island Comic Con, and I do that every year. And in 2017, I was lucky enough. One of the members came over to see me, and didn't realize they were going to be there, and actually, to my surprise, invited me to be on a panel. He's met me through the New England chapter. Will have parties or get-togethers every now and then. So got to know him through that, and so he knew me and was supported me, and liked what I was doing and liked the strip and that. So would you like to come up to do a panel? And I was like, really? And I said, yeah. He's like, yeah, come on. So not being a member, and I was like really excited, and here I am with Ed Steckley and Joe Staten up on a panel, and I'm just like really excited about it, and here I am taking questions.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm sitting next to the guy that's been with Marvel and DC for 40 years and draws Dick Tracy, and who else knows?
Yeah.
It's been in the business for a long time, and I'm taking questions and that. And so that was a lot of fun. And we went downstairs, and I posed my interest in becoming a member, not thinking I had a chance in hell. I had some help in steering in the right direction, and some big support from everybody, knowing, being, telling me that, you've got some great success and some great determination, and and you live in the dream, as it were, and that's the essence of what the National Cartoonist Society is about. And try it out. I got some recommendation letters and finally sent them in, and sure enough, a unanimous decision, and I got in, and that was a huge hurdle for me in my career, that I
Sure.
that I got that. And I've been a member for a couple of years now, and recently I'm trying entered for the comic strip panel for the Reuben Awards, and for the first time. So see how that goes.
Yeah, sure.
Because I'm
Hey, you got to
against the big
try,
shot.
right?
Yeah, you can't win if you don't play, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so it's been a great experience. I've met some great people. I've been able to it's I'm able to harvest just information. I'm always learning. I always want to from professionals, like Rick and Ed and just people that I've met. I make sure I at least contact them in some way and keep in touch in some way. And they've all been just so nice in their support, and just learned so much. And they're always open to me asking questions and that. And in turn, I can use that information for people that are just starting out. A lot of these people I meet at Comic Cons and will be asking me questions, and I've gotten to the point where, geez, I have some knowledge, and I can help these people out.
So,
So it's a great experience for me, and I'm really proud to be a part of it. So somebody upstairs was looking out for me, and seeing my potential in that. So yeah, it's a great thing.
yeah, congratulations, and it is quite a feather in your cap. It's not an easy thing necessarily to get into the National Cartoonist Society. It is kind of complicated. I know I've always been sort of deterred from trying just because I look at the requirements and I'm like, oh, geez, I don't think I fit the bill. But I think it's kind of worth exploring because I know, and for others out there listening, because I think they're looking for new members, and there are some benefits to becoming a member if you fit the requirements. So, that's great. Congratulations, and I think it's wonderful that you're out there representing them and a part of it too. So you do get some benefits from that. So one of the things I wanted to touch on also is you've had some health issues in the last couple of years, haven't you?
Yeah.
And you've overcome
six
those, which is pretty cool.
6 months ago, I had a heart attack, and it was a big one. I mean, I'm 53. I'll be 54 in a couple of weeks,
Oh man.
and I'm young. I'm actually 6 years old inside, but
Yeah.
yeah, um, there was a big one. I had a what they now finding out, it's got a nickname. It's called the Widowmaker.
Oh my
Um,
Lord.
it's 100% blockage
Oh
in an
God.
artery. So it's the sink that finally nothing's getting down, nothing's draining, and it's just completely clogged. And one night we was sitting in the living room, and girls are in their rooms, and my wife's sitting in a chair across from me, and I start having pain in my chest. And I'm thinking, oh, this is gas. I had a meatball sandwich, 2 hours before, and I'm like, okay. And it's getting worse. And then all of a sudden, 5,000 elephants sit on my chest. And I get up, start walking around. Maybe this will help. And to no avail. And I sit down, and then all of a sudden, my arm goes numb. My left arm tingling in my fingers and that. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? And then I feel a warmness in my throat, and I'm telling my wife, I said, I don't know what's going on. And my wife would be the first person to tell you I'm a hypochondriac. And so she's looking at me. She says, do you want me to drive you to the hospital? And I'm like, no. I said, I'm like, so she's, let me rub your back, because now my back's hurting. So she got the elbow to my shoulder blade and that, and then it's getting worse. And then all of a sudden I start to sweat on my left side, like someone just turned on the faucet. And that's when I picked up the phone and I called 911. And lucky enough
Yeah.
for me, the fire department's literally across the street from my house. And so they were there, not even 5 minutes, and that's what saved my life. Because with one of those heart attacks, the longer you wait, the worse it gets because your heart's fighting for oxygen.
Oh man.
And so they got me in the ambulance, and my wife hops in the front seat, and they immediately give me a couple of aspirin, and they're on the phone with the hospital, and they hook me up to the machine and taking the readings, and they can send that. Technology is wonderful nowadays. They're able to send that to the hospital, and we got from my house to the hospital in like 15 minutes, going, the Spaceball ludicrous speed, and we get there, and there's a whole team just waiting for me. They knew I was coming. They're all standing there like a pit crew waiting for the car to come in. The next thing I know, I've got people sticking me, and people cutting my shirt open, and this other one's putting the pads on me. This other one's doing this, asking me questions, and I got like a swarm of bees around me. And next thing I know, I'm in the operating room, passed out. And next thing I know, I'm in the recovery room. And
Wow.
but being the nerd that I am, I kept asking for my friend Ray, that's a cardiologist PA there. I saw him, and so he's finally there. He's my wife and kids are there. Of course, I've known him since high school. He's one of my best friends, and going down the hallway to go into my room and stuff, and I'm like, oh, not how you do, not how I'm feeling, and me saying this, not how do I feel and what's going on and stuff. But we were talking about the Infinity Gauntlet and Infinity War, and did you see the scene? Did you see that scene? That was what was important to me at the time.
Yeah.
I didn't care about the part, and
Yeah, you didn't care.
so
Worried about your. Yeah.
yeah, and there's important things in the world, and so and oh, by the way, this is with my comic strip. This is how dedicated I am. In the time it took them to get from the fire station to my house, I had a deadline. So I grabbed as I'm thriving and throbbing in pain, I grabbed my laptop, and I didn't care what I typed as long as it went to the right guys. I sent my strip out to like 3 or 4 papers.
This is how dedicated a cartoonist you are. You're having a heart attack and you're sending your strip. Oh my Lord! Sending your strip to the newspapers to make sure it gets in on time.
I was like, I am not having this hanging over my head. I got enough problems right now. I'm not going to go into the hospital like, God, are they going to accept this as an excuse?
Oh. Yeah, that's a good question. I know those editors can be pretty tough.
I can just hear it now. I don't know, buddy.
Yeah,
Try again.
count. Yeah.
You can't call in sick with us.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So this was It was, you said 6 months ago, something like that?
It's in June. Yeah, the middle of June. Yeah.
So what's the recovery period like, and what are you doing now to make sure this doesn't happen again?
Well, I was out of work for, I don't know, a month and a half, and I finally decided to go back and, taking things easy and that, and you go to cardio rehab, which is basically Planet Fitness on steroids with a heart monitor. And so I did that for a while, and you exercise with the heart monitor on, and they're taking your blood pressure, and they're watching you very closely, and you're on the treadmill, you're on the bike, kind of thing. And there were also classes I could take, nutrition classes. You could see a nutritionist there. You could have a counselor to talk to if you're having trouble with that, which is part of it. So I did that for a while, and then I got better, and it's expensive. So, and by the way, I'm in this place and I'm like the youngest guy there. Everybody here is on Medicare.
Yeah.
And
sure.
which was fun. And so then I go into something called maintenance, which is, you're doing better, and you're, getting stronger, and so we'll put you on maintenance for a while. And I did that, and then I finally got to the point where, a couple months later, I could just my cardiologist said I could do Planet Fitness, which is a hell of a lot cheaper.
Uh-huh.
So I'm doing that, and Planet Fitness is right up the road, so that's easy. And so I do that, and 3 or 4 times a week, and get my heart rate up, and not. I've lost a lot of weight. Just saw my regular. I got a new primary care and looked at the blood work, and I'm doing like much better, cholesterol wise, and that. And so it's been a journey. It's been a
Yeah.
little bit of an eye opener.
Yeah.
A little more appreciation for life in that, and
Sure. The little thing.
makes me want to just do things. And especially with my strip, I got a second chance with this. So I remember being on the table in the hospital with the surgeon there, and he says, "Now, Timothy," because they always call you by your proper name,
Uh-huh.
and for some reason they yell. So, "Can you hear me, Mr.
That increase.
Jones?"
Yeah,
Yeah.
the older you get, the more people are going to do that to you. They're
Yeah,
going to yell.
I've never understood it. It's not my ears, buddy. It's my heart. But anyways, and so he's like, we're gonna catheterize you, and by the way, they go in through your wrist now. They don't go in through your groin, thank God. And
Okay.
and so and I looked at him and I said, I'm not going anywhere. I've got things to do. I've got, and I looked at him and I said, I've got deadlines. So let's get this over with. Um, and a
Yeah, I got to
funny,
get back to the drawing table.
yeah, exactly. And a funny story too. The next morning, I'm Catholic, and the priest comes in, and he's standing there, and he's got his Bible, he's got his little box of stuff, and he looks at me and he says, he introduces himself, and that, and he says, we'd like to offer you your last rites.
Oh, dear Lord. Oh, are you kidding me? Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, and I'm trying to look at him, and I'm trying to see if he's kidding around. And I went, huh? And he says, well, we also call it the anointing of the sick. And I
Oh.
said, well, you could have led with that, you know. And
Yeah, right. Oh my gosh. Talk about, oh my gosh. But
I said to him, I'm still processing this, and so
yeah, I
I
said, don't rush me, buddy. Right? I'm not ready.
exactly. Being the comedian that I am, I said to him, "You want to give me the last rites? Says, can you go on the other side of the bed and give me my last lefts?" You know.
There you go. I mean,
Uh,
oh my gosh.
that's what I told him. I said, I'm still processing this, and that. So this that was a quirky story. So fast forward
Fun.
back where I am, I'm feeling much better, and lost weight, and been able to keep it off, and change my diet, and you know moving
You're
along
taking care of
at
yourself.
the right speed.
Yeah. Yeah. You could, it's scary. Is there a history of heart disease in your family?
I think in my father's side, come to find out, but not my immediate family
I see.
were. So
So
I'm kind of the
you
first
had no
guy.
clue. I mean, it's
No,
like I'm assuming because you're relatively young, you weren't going to the doctor on a regular basis, and you didn't, nobody discovered this blockage because you weren't getting EKGs and all that kind of thing beforehand. You were just, you know, carrying on life and pretending whatever it wasn't there.
well, it was funny too because in retrospect, I wasn't feeling that great before June, and I just kind of figured, well, I actually joined Planet Fitness in the winter before June, and I think I went 3 times because I just
Yeah.
didn't feel good after I was done. I really
Uh-huh.
did. So in retrospect, this is probably why.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Cranky. I was, just not feeling great and easily tired in that. And it's funny because when I saw my doctor last week, I said, what caused this? And I said, I know it's, cholesterol. And it said, but, the cholesterol wasn't horrible. It
Hmm.
didn't help. But, and he says, no, it's genetics.
Yeah,
There's some people that he said that just don't produce good cholesterol.
yeah,
And so, but I'm better.
yeah. And you live to cartoon another day,
That's
right?
right.
And true, I mean, it's something that we roll our eyes at when we're 30, but we get to our age, and after an experience like you've had, you just kind of say, "Hey, man, every day is a gift, and I got to live it to its fullest and enjoy it because it's a gift." And let's just do what we need to do and not take it for granted because it's easy to take it for granted. So, well, I'm glad you're still with us, Tim.
Yeah.
I'm glad you've overcome that experience and you just take care of yourself now. Make sure you eat right and keep up the exercise and it's great that you talk to us about it because anybody out there experiences similar symptoms. Hey, call the ambulance right away. You know, and be aware of that. I lost my dad to a heart attack. He had heart disease problems,
Mm.
and I lost one of my best friends in my life at the age of 53 from a heart attack. And it's serious stuff, and you got to be aware of it, and you got to take care of yourself, especially as we start to get older, and we like to think 50 and 60 is not that old, and it's not. But in terms of the body, things start happening, and you have to be wary and take care of yourself and go to the doctor. And it sounds
Yeah, I mean, there are people that are like fit as a fiddle, and
yeah,
they still get heart attacks. So
sure, yep.
you never know.
You don't know, and so yeah, it's important stuff, and I'm just glad you're okay and you're doing well.
Well, thank you very much. I
Well, listen,
actually had a few episodes, meaning my strip, not episodes with me, and that because uh, Sour Grapes is actually an extension of me, of
right.
my life experiences. So of course, this type of thing is happening in the strip in some way. So
Yeah, it'll be reflected there, sure, of course, because that's your art, right? So that's
yeah,
where it's gonna come out. So Tim, it's been really nice. It's just gone by in a flash, and I wish you continued success with Sour Grapes and your health. And you've got a bunch of shows coming up this year, so people can see you at different conventions in Rhode Island and New England primarily, right?
yeah. If you go on my website, um, sourgrapescomic.com, you
Okay.
can see I post where I'm going to be and everything else about me and the strip itself and the newspapers, and I even have interviews on there. This will be on there once I
Oh,
get it.
hey, great. Wonderful.
Yeah,
All righty. Well, I thank you for being on the show, and it's been a lot of fun, and it's been really great to, talk to you and get to know you. So, thanks again, and we'll catch up with you again sometime in the future.
yeah. Thank you very much, Jeff. I really appreciate you having me on. I'm humbled.
Oh, hey, no reason to be humbled, man. Absolutely. You deserve it. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode with Tim Jones. Man, wasn't that a story about his heart attack? It really does put everything in perspective, doesn't it? When an event like that strikes, you really see and come out of it, I think, acknowledging and cherishing the things in life that really matter. I really admire Tim for his attitude and for his ability to persevere and overcome and face it all with a great sense of humor, which a lot of us wouldn't do, but boy, he certainly has. You've got to hand it to him. working on the comic strip while he's there in the hospital bed, making sure he doesn't miss a deadline. That is something. I don't know how many of us would be that dedicated. And so hats off to Tim. Make sure you check out Tim's work at sourgrapescomic.com, okay? You can also find Tim on Instagram at sourgrapes2017. So look for him there. And I'm sure he's on Facebook. I'm not on Facebook very often, so look for him there. Well, I guess that'll do it for this time. Next time, we've got Brian Gordon of Foul Language, which is a big hit online and on Instagram and Facebook and everywhere else, and in print too, as Brian's got 2 or 3 books out now. So be sure to come back for that one. It should be out really soon, a couple of weeks, so be looking for that, okay? As always, I appreciate your visit. Thanks for allowing me to bend your ear, and thanks for listening.